Good morning, everyone. Welcome again back to Dunedin Fine Arts Center virtual art space. Today we're speaking with artist Rachel Simmons and her fascinating show called The Language of Watching and Flock. I guess it's a combination show, but the exhibition centers around birds and bird song and bird watching and bird culture, all things birds. It's a really fun show. It's interactive, and we're so lucky to have Rachel with us today. What we're going to do today is we're gonna watch one of lead curator Catherine Bergman's videos. It's a walkthrough for anyone who hasn't been able to come in or can't come in. So let me do that now. And then after the video, we'll speak with the artist. I love that one. Usually we put music over it. I love
That was great.
Yeah, that was really good.
As you can tell, I'm not too accomplished, but I had lots of cool sound effects to work with this time.
So before we get on with our talk here, everyone, you can watch that video and all of our other videos, artist talks and upcoming events. Here we have the New Perspectives High School reception in our youth education gallery. So you can find all the videos on Facebook. And then we have years and years worth of videos on our YouTube channel, including our Coffee and Conversation series and a whole mess of videos from our faculty talking about their classes and things like that. So hop on over to those to see some more. Catherine, we'll let you take it from here.
Yes, I am really honored to welcome Rachel with us today. And I'll just give a little brief intro that she got her MFA from LSU in painting and drawing. And that was after earning her BFA from Rollins College. And once she graduated from LSU, she was hired immediately by Rollins College, where she's been professor of art for the last 20 years. And she focuses on printmaking and book arts. During the course of her career, she has traveled a number of wonderful places around the world to do research for her various bodies of work that focus on environmental concerns. And she's traveled with colleagues, scientists, and other academics to the Galapagos, Antarctica, Hawaii, Namibia, and she'll tell us more about that, I'm sure. But I just want to say that we're great fans of Rachel and what she does. And this is the third exhibit that she has been part of here at DFAC. The first being in 2009 when she presented her body of work called Wonders of the Sea. And then in 2014, she was part of a group show called Living Matters. And in that show, she presented a collaborative comic that she created with fellow artist Julian Chambliss, featuring Future Bear, a polar bear who comes back from the future to teach us how to take better care of the environment. So now we are so happy again. Here she is in our upstairs teaching gallery, and Nathan and I had a blast installing the show. So Rachel joins us from her home in Orlando, and welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Nathan. You've been so generous to offer me so many opportunities to talk about my work with this show. It's been really fun. Love the video. Oh my gosh, so much. Love that. Every minute of it. That was great. So yeah, I have some slides to show you. I just wanted to take this chance to, let you know a little bit more about my practice, give you a sense of kind of what I did before I started doing all of the bird work. And I'm really pleased some of my colleagues are here, friends are here, and I'm glad to meet new friends that are here as well. And I hope to be able to come to the Dunedin Fine Arts Center and do a workshop so we can build the flock. That sounds really exciting. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. I wanted to thank the Dunedin Fine Arts Center for again hosting me. Catherine's been such a huge supporter of my work over the years. It's been incredible to be able to have that connection again. And it's just been a wonderful experience. They also installed the show in such an amazing way. You could see in the video just how interactive it is, and it's incredible to see. So, okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll start by saying that my practice is really diverse, and that's no exaggeration. I do so many different things. It's hard sometimes to explain, I guess, what I do because I do so many things, but I have a practice in printmaking, painting and drawing, artist books. I also make comic books. I make zines, altered books. And I do this kind of interactive, collaborative, community-based work as well. So I have a lot of interests, but I would say primarily what links them all together is this desire to connect with other people through our understanding of the environment, which is not always a common understanding or a common connection. We all have very different ways of understanding nature and our role. And I'm fascinated with meeting people and understanding how they connect so that I can better understand my relationship with nature. And of course, my work has a real bent towards sustainability and awareness as well. There's definitely always an educational piece. So these are some of the threads that you'll see throughout the presentation. I definitely conduct a lot of research where I kind of dig into a topic for a while and figure out what's interesting to me, what I can do with it. I do collaborate with other scholars in many of my projects, but not always. And then I'm able, or have been before last year, able to travel quite extensively to some really interesting places that not a lot of people get to go to. And then community. Community is really important to me as a printmaker. You know, I run a print studio, and other printmakers will know how collaborative a print studio can be, how it's a shared space for many people. And that, I think, has contributed to my ongoing work, making my practice very inclusive with community members. So I'll just start. I'll go back a little bit to my travels to Antarctica in 2008. And again, in 2009, I got to travel from Ushuaia to the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. And I went primarily to investigate a couple of things. One top of mind was ecotourism. I'd taken a trip to the Galapagos previously and was really interested in understanding if tourists are allowed to go to a wild place, is it still wild? And why are wildernesses an important, both a conservation, from a conservation aspect, why are wildernesses important, but also psychologically, why do we need there to be a wilderness? And there's so few places now that we can actually call wilderness in the world. So what happens when we go and visit those places? What are the impacts? What are the pros? What are the cons? What do we take from it? And what can we do to protect it? So I went on my first trip on this Russian icebreaker. It held about 100 passengers, and we were from all over the world. And it was the most breathtaking landscape I'd ever seen, especially considering that I live in Florida and I don't often see ice or snow of any kind. You know, we were very comfortable on the ship. We had meals, we had heat, we were warm, but still we were going out into this really extreme environment every day on little rubber ships called Zodiacs, disembarking, working our way around icebergs, freezing our toes and fingers off just to get a glimpse, just to experience this. So there's this real like dichotomy, I think, between being comfortable as a tourist and being uncomfortable, going to this wild place and also wanting to have the comforts of home with you as you're traveling. And this was by no means a luxury cruise. There are such things in Antarctic tourism, ships carrying thousands of passengers, and that's a whole different level of impact. So I tried to choose travel that has low impacts when possible. So here I am behind my camera. In 2008, I took like 2,000 photographs during the 6 days that we were actually in Antarctica, just constantly photographing. I was consumed, as many tourists are, with this desire to take it with me, to preserve it. And this was the way that I decided to do that. I was lucky enough to go back the following year, and I kind of regretted being behind the camera so much. And so the following year, I think my subconscious told me that, and I left my batteries at home. So as soon as my first battery ran out, I was done taking pictures the second time. And it was such a relief to just put it down and be like much more present and in the moment. So I still have this enormous bank of photographs that I unearth and use still today to make work about this trip that I took over 12 years ago. So in addition to ecotourism, one of the concepts that I had on my mind was this notion of how do we visualize climate change? So I came across this essay by Timothy Morton called Hyperobjects, Philosophy and Ecology After the End of the World. And again, this was around 2008. So the hyperobject, as he describes it, global warming is churning away, emitting ghosts of itself from my perusal. This horrible colossus is not capable of being visualized by humans. And I think that was one of the ideas that really captured my attention, because if there's one thing that I think we're always able to do as an artist is visualize ideas. But climate change is so massive that we almost always ever encounter it as consequence, not as a source. It isn't like looking at a satellite image of a hurricane and going, there's the hurricane, there's the problem. Climate change is so dispersed and hard to pin down. There's so many different causes that I thought as an artist, it would be interesting to try to get at this idea of the difficulty of visualizing it. So I used photographs like this one. This was taken in the Lemaire Channel, which is a shallow channel kind of in between some islands in the peninsula where you can go and see these amazing icebergs. And I started making some work about them. This one's called Equilibrium, and it thinks carefully about the balance that you're trying to strike as a kind of eco-tourist. Like if you're an aware eco-tourist, not all of them are the same. I actually paid a lot of attention to the behavior of the other tourists on the ship. And sometimes I was just shocked at how little they cared for the environment, how they would accidentally walk onto a penguin's nest or just be completely oblivious. And other people who were very, very careful with where they put their feet and whether or not they chose to eat meat on the trip, you know, down to those sort of levels of managing your own impact. So this piece at some point is trying to get to that tension between, you know, being able to do whatever you want and the responsibility that comes with being able to do whatever you want. And this is just a photograph I just dug up like 2 days ago of being on the top deck of the ship. And you can see that we're producing pollution, right? Just being there and heating the ship and eating food produces a certain amount of carbon. So there's this trade-off, right? Is it worth educating tourists this way to create more carbon in the atmosphere? And I'm still not sure about that. Like, part of me believes that it's changed my life for the better. And as an artist, my job is to take those experiences and share them and hopefully create awareness, which is my way of offsetting my carbon footprint. So this artist book that I just finished actually was started in 2009. It's called We Do As We Please, and it folds out into a rather large map. It's about 6 feet wide and 3-4 feet tall. And it's filled with linoleum prints and letterpress. It's made out of Japanese paper, which is washed with ink. And the color palette is very much pulled from my experiences of the various colors of ice in Antarctica. But the symbols are all symbols of consumption, travel, and the text poses this question about doing as we please and asks whether or not always doing as we please is the right thing to do. And if we decide to drive an SUV, and at the time I owned an SUV, I actually used my car as a model for an image. If you're going to drive one, shouldn't you be aware of the impacts that it's having and try to mitigate those? Is it okay for us to travel anywhere and do anything we want? We can take that same energy that and put it towards innovation. So there's some symbols of that in here as well. This is also another piece based on my travels that I just finished last year. And it's called Tracking B15. So in 2000, the largest iceberg ever to break off of Antarctica, was about the size of Connecticut, and they named it B15. It broke off and it started circumnavigating the continent. And I decided to make up this sort of fictional narrative of somebody who became obsessed with tracking the iceberg. And so they track it for 18 years. The last remnants of B15 actually melted in 2018. Mm-hmm. So it took that long for the iceberg to break down completely and melt. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted the book to be really interactive, like a folded map with a compass, some kind of directional tools. It's made with letterpress and screen printing and digital printing, kind of all work together. And the narrative is actually kind of funny, I think, because it uses quite a lot of humor. And the narrator starts calling the iceberg Betty and he names all the iceberg B names like Brunhilde and Bilbo Baggins. So he becomes really like infatuated with the story, like kind of fascinated by it. And what's funny about the giant iceberg is that it was fascinating, but it was also really scary, right? So it lands us right at that point of understanding nature through the concept of the sublime, which is to be in awe of it at the same time that we're a little bit frightened of it. After sort of those initial polar travels, I still had a lot of this stuff on my mind. And I started creating these paintings and drawings of a jetpack wearing superhero future bear. So this polar bear that at the time, I didn't know why I was making these images, except I was really tired of seeing these Time magazine covers, the annual climate change report. And they would always have a starving, helpless polar bear clinging onto an ice floe and just looking terrible and sad. And I thought, it would be so interesting if we could empower that image and change it from a kind of victim to a superhero. And wouldn't that give us some encouragement to be solving that problem a little bit more aggressively or thinking about it? And I thought also at the time, my daughter was about 7 when I started making this work, and I really wanted to connect with kids her age. Also during this time, the Deepwater Horizon spill happened. You can kind of see that depicted on the right side. The tourists in the center were actually from photographs that I took in Antarctica. And this landscape was also based on an Antarctic landscape. Now, of course, polar bears don't live in Antarctica, but this is Future Bear. She can go wherever she wants. So I started thinking more along these lines. All these things were kind of converging together. And if you're interested, I produced a whole artist book on the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which is on my website. So at the same time, I started practicing for this TED Talk that I gave in Orlando. And a good friend of mine, Julian Chambliss, who's a historian and an expert in comic books, he was giving a talk too. So we practiced our talk together. And he got to know my talk.
So my superhero identity is visual artist. And by day, I'm a mild-mannered college professor. This is a video I shot at the Central Park Zoo in New York City. It shows one of the resident polar bears swimming back and forth in her habitat. Polar bears are an overused but extremely effective symbol of our collective feelings about climate change. They're white, they're fluffy, they're kind of dog-like, they're cute, and we hate the idea that they may one day be extinct. This polar bear's behavior, this repetitive behavior, swimming back and forth, reflects the rut we find ourselves in the discussion about climate change. How do we enter this discussion? What are the solutions to these problems? This is Future Bear. This is a character that I've created to use in my work because I see that it's a very powerful visual symbol. And I'm interested in using symbols like that to create really clear messages about environmental issues. But my work wasn't always about.
So that just gives you a kind of sense of what I was thinking about at the time. And after we did this talk, Julian was like, that character looks like a comic book character. And I was like, yeah, maybe. And he's like, what if I wrote you a script? Would you do anything with it? And I was like, yeah, maybe. So he wrote me this full graphic narrative in script form. And I don't think he thought I was going to do anything with it, but I did. And I created all these drawings in this story. And then we started producing this work called Future Bear as a wall-based comic. We went to a conference. This is us at the Sequential Smart Conference, which is for people who use comics in their teaching. And then we produced this like 10-foot long wall comic that Catherine remembers from showing it around that time. The story is basically this kind of scientifically enhanced, all decked out with gear, polar bear that comes back from the future to try to help us avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And it's really colorful, and It was meant to be kind of very sci-fi inspired and very appealing to kids of all ages, adults and kids of all ages. And at the end of the first issue, you know, time travel never goes well. And poor Future Bear ends up in the wrong place and she's tranquilized while the park rangers try to figure out why there's a polar bear in Florida. And we invited all of these co-collaborators from the community in to help us write what happens next in the story. How does she complete her mission with all her fancy gear? And what does she do now that her mission's been derailed by landing in the wrong location? So we talked to all these different school groups, high school, middle school, elementary school groups, community groups, and we offered them different tools to become involved in the story. Sometimes they would make comic strips. Sometimes they would write short stories, all kinds of different ways. We included a graphic design friend of ours, Stu Helm, and he created this wonderful mission book for kids. And by this time, my daughter was about 10. And so I kept aiming the work kind of at her age group. So this was kind of right around, I mean, I think older kids would like it too, but it was really meant for about 10-year-olds. And then we got this awesome grant to take this project into one of the local schools. And my printmaking class met with this group of 5th graders for a whole semester. And we read Future Bear and we talked about climate change and we asked them what kinds of practical solutions they could come up with to you know, help the effort with sustainability. And kids are great. They have so much imagination. They're so willing to participate and experiment. And they came up with all kinds of fun things. So we decided to make some games, card games, board games, posters, anything basically we could print. They came to the print shop and learned how to do printmaking. And they were all public awareness messages and games that were about Future Bear and about climate change. And that was super, super fun. So they made all of these amazing decks of cards. They created these interactive, like choose your own adventure games about Future Bear's story. You know, we were like a little club, a little Future Bear club going. And just in case you thought it would end there, it does not. We got a bear suit. We took the bear suit on the road. Oh, my friends and students who volunteered to be in the bear suit, they're great. So we went to the Orlando Science Center and did a Future Bear program. We went to MegaCon in Orlando, this huge comic book conference, and handed out like flyers about sustainability. Deadpool, there were Deadpools everywhere that year, and they didn't know what to make of this Future Bear, but it was super fun. One of my students was in that costume sweating all day. So that kind of brings us up to speed. There's a lot more, of course, that I did over that time period, but I wanted you to kind of experience those projects. So this project, The Language of Watching, really started in 2015. I got to go to this wonderful residency called Constellation Studios. And I actually think Karen Kuntz is here. She's the one who invited me. Constellation Studios is her baby. It's her artist residency and workshop space. It's wonderful. So it's in Lincoln, Nebraska. If you ever get to go, I highly recommend it. She does all kinds of wonderful exhibitions there as well. And I was talking to Karen about what I could do in her community because I wanted to work with people in her community. And she started talking to me about how many birders were in Nebraska. And in particular, this enormous, crazy sandhill crane migration that happens. The Nebraska Platte River Valley is right under the sandhill crane central flyway path. So, you know, hundreds of thousands of birds stop in this one location on their way migrating from south to north in the summer. So actually, it's almost migration time. I think right around St. Patrick's Day is usually the height of the migration season in Nebraska. She hooked me up with some local birders who provided me with videos and photographs. And I just thought it was interesting. At first, I thought I would focus more on the pipeline, the XL pipeline that they were proposing that would come down and possibly disrupt some of this habitat. But in the end, I got really caught up in the culture of bird watchers and bird watching. It was fascinating to me to start understanding what that was all about. So I'll let you just enjoy a few minutes of crane honking and then. So yeah, that's something to see. I still would love to go back and witness it in person myself because it's looks tremendous. And I think it's like, you know, being on the African savannah and seeing that same number of animals. It's really, people come from all over the world to see it. So Karen helped me organize this workshop and also introduced me to the bird nerd, Jason Sauver, who works at the Audubon Spring Creek Prairie Center and knows everything about birds and can identify a bird by sound. He can identify the sex of the bird, the age of the bird. It's just incredible. So he actually came to this workshop as well as some, you know, local kind of art enthusiasts and some members of Karen's family. And everybody was just so interested in telling bird stories. So we made these prints, and what we did was I found some silhouettes from Peterson's guide, which is one of these popular birding guides. And silhouettes are the one way the birders can easily identify birds, especially if they're far away, flying, backlit. Like you kind of depend on the silhouette often to identify it. And then I thought, well, if we start with silhouettes, wouldn't it be interesting to allow people to create their own kind of imagined patterns and color palettes to fill inside of the silhouettes. And I'll be honest, I think the printmaking part of this is just genuinely about building community and experimenting. And what happens during these workshops is we talk about birds. And for me, that's the actual work that we're producing. It's the conversations that we have. It's the stories that we share. Everybody's got bird stories. And it's this like moment to connect about that, you know, while we keep our hands busy and we make things. And so the prints that we produce are like artifacts of our conversations. You can see how we installed them here in Karen's space. They stretched on these cool wires that she had. She had these installed already and they worked out perfectly. And I just loved how they looked like they were kind of flying across the space. And you can see some of the details. So in the first round, I kind of, well, and I do this sometimes with every project, like I'll kind of mix some colors and just put them out and we'll make plates. And then people start inventing and creating other things as it goes. In fact, there's a very interesting bird in Catherine's video that doesn't look like any other bird. It's like a fantasy bird that was made by a woman in Lincoln. And she wrote me a note.
That's my favorite bird.
Yeah, exactly. So I also made this book, A Survey of Popular Birds and Their Behaviors, while I was there. And the last page of the book is a survey. And the surveys have become their own thing since then. I have this birdhouse. And when you fill in a survey, you put it in the birdhouse. And I've been collecting the surveys. I've got hundreds and hundreds of surveys. It's like I created this thing for myself that I can't even like control or deal with because I have so many, but I love being able to display them and also just read through them. Every time I have an exhibition, I go read through the stack and there's always so many great responses.
I grabbed some before we started, and you know, one of your questions at the top, it's your 3 favorite birds, and then the bird that you consider the nuisance. And a lot of people said, no, there's no bird that I consider a nuisance. Never. That was great.
Are they being honest though? Because come on, everybody.
Somebody said, well, seagulls, if pressed.
Well, that's so polite. Yeah, you can, I've seen a lot of blue jays and seagulls, and terns. If you live in the, if you, like Arctic terns, on a trip to Iceland, we were absolutely bombarded by Arctic terns. So it depends again on how you're interacting with these animals, where you are in their habitat, and how you feel about them. And how you feel about them is really personal. Like this person said that pelicans were a clown with the gift of grace, which I love. Cardinals squawk in a beautiful red suit.
Oh,
Ospreys are power, grace, and mother. Like the language that people use to describe, again, their interactions, to me is so amazing to read through and see what people write. Some people write about, their mother's favorite birds or bird song that reminds them of someone who's gone. It's great.
yes.
So a lot of my inspiration comes from vintage bird guides. So as a book artist, I collect books. I love adapting old books and kind of using them to create something new. This one's called The Book of Birds. It's one of my favorites, and it was published in the 30s by National Geographic. It has these very lush illustrations. And what captivated me were the captions really under the illustrations. So this one says, "The prairie falcon is neither entirely saint nor altogether sinner." And what I noticed was there was a lot of religious language around describing birds. There was language that was stereotypical, language about immigrants, language about gender roles, all human concepts and constructs that are applied to birds and bird behaviors. And this, it's just rich with this sort of material. So it's a little bit of an anthropological exploration of humans when you start looking at these field guides. This one is on the left is woodpeckers, and the caption says, "Everybody knows the redhead, that conceited rural dandy," right? Because if a bird is flashy, it must be conceited. It must be, right? So it's like, again, comparing them to humans all the time. Always really an interesting thing for me. So the book, the survey book was really a collection of broadsides. This one, "Bank swallows maneuver like tiny combat planes." The typography was all created around this caption and trying to kind of take this image and, without showing any birds, have you understand bird behavior just through the typography. Here's another one. "The saucy titmouse plays many a prank." And titmice are one of my favorite birds. They come up in another one of my broadsides. But I just loved this language, like that a bird could be saucy. Was just so funny.
Rachel, I have to interject here because Michael, who before everybody joined us and is part of our audience, who lives not far from the Art Center on a lake where she captures, as a photographer, incredible bird life. She had a titmouse that would land on her hair like a nest, and it would come back to her regularly.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, she has a
Bird
lot.
lady.
I know, it was a total Disney, man.
Well, and that, I'm glad you bring that up, because the images of the titmouse are really like romanticized, and they look like little Disney characters, which suits the time period as well. This is a book to get people interested in birds. It's not hard ornithological science. It's not the scientific study of bird. It's the pastime of birding and bird watching. So the language and the images are suitable for that. So after that, I went to visit my good friend Ben Reinhardt and his students at Lawrence University in Wisconsin. And I did a project with them. We went bird watching, and I introduced them to bird guides. There were 2 bird watchers in this group, but I will say on the whole that younger people bird watching is not something they're doing a lot of, which again, I think is really important to introduce them to it as a way of connecting with nature, because it's just so accessible. You don't really need anything fancy. You don't even need binoculars, really. So we looked through all the bird books, and they chose some captions that they thought were either really funny, really interesting, kind of troubling, and they collated some of those. And then we went about starting this this collaborative artist book. So at this stage, we are cutting out pieces of paper so we can create some cyanotypes from a collage. This is what they looked like. And these became the covers for the book, Conceited Rural Dandies. And they're all unique. And all the imagery was created by the students. And then they helped me set some type for the book, which I printed on this beautiful little CMP and also on this proofing press. So this would be the background for the book. And I got to investigate their type collection. So very similar to what I got to do at Karen's studio, Constellation Studios. I got to investigate that type collection as well. So these became the backgrounds for the book, the cover for the book, and then the interior. So this is on display at the Fine Arts Center right now. And they include my own drawings and also these found images of ladies' hats. So we took all the captions and layered them in the background. And then on these vellum sheets are the drawings and the hats. And I started investigating this connection between ladies' hats in the Edwardian and Victorian era, the fashion of wearing feathers, and the destruction of birds and bird habitats. And that's going to come up at the very end of the talk, because I've just created a new work around that, that moment in time as well. So I do a lot of writing in my work. This piece of text is something that I wrote for the book, as well as drawing text from found sources. And text and images have always been a really important part of my work. I got to take the flock project to the University of Tampa, and they went nuts. They did double-sided birds, this beautiful color palette, and they introduced all these new patterns. It was a printmaking class, kind of an introductory printmaking class, and they were so in it 100%, and it was great to see. So we had a blast, and we took that body and combined it with the Nebraska ones and the ones I'd made with my students at another workshop. And then the flock became really robust, and it was installed at the Orlando Science Center. Again, we had wires. This time we used magnets, and they were all over the walls. Eventually, I got to go to Central Print. This is in St. Louis. And if you've never been to the neighborhood of Old North St. Louis, it's a wonderful neighborhood that's being revitalized. There are all these beautiful turn of the 19th century 3-story brick buildings available that are either crumbling or they have good bones and you can get in there and save them. And the community has been trying to revitalize the main street and beyond. So you can see the print shop is like this heart of this community. Everybody goes to the print shop, all the neighborhood kids, lots of artists, lots of students. It's a great, really great location. They also host the Ladies of Letterpress conference every year. So we got to install the current version of flock, and I had added some of these larger birds for the Science Center. Those are screen prints, but the images were taken from some birds that were produced that were already in the flock. I loved it on this reclaimed wood wall that they have, which is just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Loved it. Still my favorite wall to have this work up on. And you can really start to see like the diversity of pattern. And my installations of this work started to be very, specific and interesting. I felt like my contribution is really how they become arranged on the wall, and how playful you can be. Catherine and Nathan were so playful with their installation. It's just a blast to put them together. So yeah, you can see lots of different patterns and colors. I do try to introduce a specific palette for every group that I work with, so I can kind of identify that batch as being from this group. And they do tend to play nicely together. So we went bird watching. in Old North. This is the community garden. I have a couple of avid tiny bird watchers there with me. We got to see American goldfinches, which we don't have in Florida, and so that was very exciting for me. Lots of beautiful birds. So even though it's an urban area, because so many houses have been knocked down, there's actually a lot of green space. So people have farms, they have animals, they have gardens galore. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot for that. And then the next day we did this workshop where we had kids and adults and all kinds of people from the neighborhood come and make birds. And they started their own wall of birds. You can see we introduced that yellow that came from spotting the goldfinch. And we got to use this really funky motorized press too, which I'd never used anything like this, but it was tons of fun. So much fun to see like all the colors that we used and how people layered them up, organized them in different ways, the different patterns that emerged. You can see all the goldfinch colors in there. So yeah, it was an intense full day of printing, but you know, it was really, really wonderful. And just to talk to everybody about their local birds that they saw every day. So that work, the book work, not Flock, but the books and this new work came together for a faculty show at the Cornell Fine Arts Museum, where I produced, I displayed the bird song broadsides, which I made at Penland. It's an artist residency in North Carolina. I did the winter residency, so it was very quiet, and it actually snowed quite a bit that year. And I used all this wonderful equipment that they have to produce these posters. And I, again, went back to my vintage bird guides and I learned about bird mnemonics, these little catchphrases that people invent to remember birdsong. And the book that I got them from was written in the 40s. And so again, it has this like kind of white Midwestern Christian background and the authors of the mnemonics kind of are revealed through the language they use. So when you look through them, you'll see this like kind of patterned palette in the background that is created with these modular blocks called P22 blocks. And I wanted to have this kind of like urban sort of looking like overhead of a city kind of view in the background. And then the bird songs, I set and I print at least one of these posters a day. And I tried different colors, I experimented, which was so fun. And I ended up producing, oh, there's me singing in the studio, singing some bird songs. I ended up producing like 120 prints in a week, like a crazy person, just printing all day long, every day. I had so much fun. So let's listen to some of the songs that go with the bird sides. This is the Eastern towhee, and this is the bird that the author of this mnemonic says sings "Drink Your Tea." So let's see if you guys hear that. I think I can actually hear that one. Like that one makes sense to me. Yeah. The Cardinal, on the other hand, has so many songs, so many phrases. Everybody, I mean, it's such a common bird, but it has such a variety of calls and songs, some of which I think sound like a laser gun. Pew, 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 pew. Right. So this is just one phrase that the author thought they could hear. So again, it's such an interesting thing to try to interpret. There is another phrase, I don't think it's in this video, but it does sound a little bit like, so it does make that kind of multiple syllable sound. This phrase, when you hear an unfamiliar song, run the bird down and identify it by sight, is actually from a bird guide from the 40s for like beginner birders. And I thought, wow, that's so aggressive. But it was also like so exciting. Like if you heard a bird you didn't know, you would just throw everything and just book it and chase the bird, you know. And sometimes I do that. My family's always like, oh, here we go again. I'm like, shh, what is that? What is that? And they're like down the block walking the dog, and I'm still standing on the corner listening, trying to figure out what that is. So I get it. You can get a little bit obsessed. So here's the tufted titmouse. There it is. So the bird that's responding to it is singing Peter, Peter, Peter. There it is.
You know,
So
it'd be interesting to ask modern people what phrases they're hearing.
Yeah, I think that might be another project that I have in mind. I want to create new bird mnemonics based on what we think we hear. Yeah, absolutely. Like I can't hear Presbyterian in this song, no matter how much I try. I feel like there's a lot of syllables at the end there that they're just trying to figure out what to do with. And that's where the Presbyterian came from. Oh, and then of course we have, oh no, will it open? Let's see. Catherine played this in her video, but I absolutely loved this version. That one yes, 100% I can hear it in that one. So I was there, I also produced this artist book. This is the typesetting that you can see, which if you've never done any letterpress, it's literally taking tiny pieces of metal and aligning them to form words. This image is forward facing, but that's not how it actually looks. It's reverse. So you do everything in reverse as well. I find it to be really relaxing, but I teach it and I know that that's not how everyone feels about it. I try to meet them halfway. But in any case, I was able to get this produced really in the last day that I was at Penland. And then I came home and used some of my cyanotype covers that I had left over from the Conceited Rural Dandies project. So it's this nice little text that I adapted from another bird watching guide that just tells you that you have to really work at communicating with birds. You have to be a good listener. You have to be patient. And I like that. And then this would probably be my most recent bird related book. This is an altered book called Birds of the World. It was a huge project that took over a year to complete. It has 98 pages. So it's an altered book based on a kind of encyclopedia of birds. It is an exhaustive encyclopedia. And my goal was to go in and kind of treat the text like raw material. So I made erasure poems from the original text, added my own narrative, and essentially the book is like a meditation on species loss. So like a lot of my work, I'm trying to get people to think about what impacts we're having on nature, but I use lots of color and strong visuals to get people kind of interested in that conversation.
Oh, I love the cutouts and how the undersides peek through. Nice.
Yeah, so the cutouts were like this meditation on loss, but also there's so much color, so it's also like a celebration of the variety of bird species that are out there.
Beautiful.
And it's full, the yellow chunks are this type, like I have a typewriter and I use it all the time in my work. And I typed up these experiences that I've had with birds, because I've seen birds in Galapagos, I've seen birds in Antarctica, Namibia, Iceland, Hawaii, all over the US. And I've had the opportunity to see some birds that not a lot of people get to see, like penguins in their natural habitat. So I got to kind of go back and think more clearly about my experiences with birds and kind of create this narrative running throughout the book. So this book is in the UCF's collection of special books, and it'll be on display at the Cornell Fine Arts Museum in the fall as part of our new artist book show. We have a collection of artist books now at Rollins College, where I teach, and we're going to be launching the collection with a big show at the Cornell. So I'll keep you updated.
Oh, please. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is a one of a kind. And when you show it, maybe you'll have the video alongside, because people can't touch it because they'll wreck it.
It's very delicate. But normally I love for people to be able to handle my books, but yeah, this one is quite fragile.
Gosh, what a treasure.
Thank you.
Really?
So these are a couple things that are coming up. I have a faculty exhibition April 9th at the Cornell. That's a group show with myself and my colleagues from the studio art program. I also have a book, the B15 book will be part of Reclamation, Artist Books on the Environment at the San Francisco Center for the Book. And the book show that I just mentioned, Common Ground, the Rollins Book Arts Collection, will be opening fall 2021, and I'm co-curating that with the head of our library. And this is my new zine. It's called Bird Ladies. And it's all about these badass ladies who helped pass the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918, which just celebrated its 100-year birthday a couple of years back. And how, even though they were denied formal education many times, they became ornithologists and activists. And even before they had the right to vote, they managed to pass this legislation to protect birds. So I'm going to give out 10 free copies after the talk. If you're not already following me and you're a new follower, I will send you a free copy. And you follow me at Bear with Jetpack. That's my Instagram handle. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm going to stick around for questions. So please let me know if you have any questions or comments.
Wow, thanks a lot, Rachel. I'm just going to start with a comment. I see Michael's got a question, so I'll just quickly. One of the first books I read when I moved to Florida in 2010 was about the feathers that were being used for hats and the hat craze.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna, if you haven't read it, everyone in the audience, it's a really interesting book about the early days of Florida environmentalism and the Audubon Society. It's called The Death of Guy Bradley. He was the, I think the first Audubon park ranger in the Everglades area. So it's a pretty fascinating story about the whole feather industry.
Will you put that title in the chat, Nathan?
Sure.
That sounds good.
Michael, you had a question there?
Let me unmute here. I'm unmuted. Yeah, no, I didn't really have a question, more of a comment. I just wanted to say how interesting. I found this wonderful. I haven't seen the exhibit over at the DFAC yet, but now I am definitely going over. I was going to go anyway, but this has really piqued my curiosity. So I'll be over there very, very soon to see that. And I did just start following you on Instagram, so I'm thrilled about that as well. And on Facebook too. I'll follow you on Facebook. And one thing I love the fact that you love tufted titmice as much as I do. I still have one that lands on my head just about every other day. She's enthralled or something. There's something about my hair that she loves. I think she wants to use it for nesting material. But the other thing I wanted to mention too was American goldfinch. You said something about not seeing them in Florida. I have a flock that stays in my backyard every winter for a few weeks. So they do pass through here. So I get to see them and photograph them quite often for a few weeks. They've actually just headed north recently, so I don't see them anymore. But thank you very much for this talk. It was great. I'm so envious of all your explorations and travels, and your work is lovely. And I like I said, I can't wait to go see the exhibit over at the Art Center soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And you're so lucky to have goldfinches in your backyard.
Can I ask, Rachel, before we lose Michael there, I wondered when you participated in the Audubon bird count, what were among the most unusual birds that you counted recently? You said
Oh, yeah.
39 species you recorded, or?
Yeah, I did. I mean, there are birds that I see. Most of them are birds that I do see off and on. Some of them are regulars in my backyard just about every day, or, I see them frequently. But a few of them are, not ones that just come around once in a while. And I didn't see any shorebirds because I'm really not on the shore. So none of those, rare shorebirds. But like the pileated woodpecker was the last bird I saw during the 4 days. And I know they're around, but I don't get to see them too often. So it was really exciting when one landed in the tree above me on the last day of the count. And a flock of hundreds and hundreds of American robins passing through in the last few weeks. So they were around as well. I mean, when you see hundreds of American robins all around you, it's like an amazing sight, right? And then just, all the regulars, the osprey come here. I get so many different birds really that pass through, but it was one of, and the little tiny birds too, like the pine warbler and the yellow-throated warbler and the palm warblers and the black and white warblers. I've had a bunch of warblers that are kind of frequent visitors too at this time of year.
Thanks, Michael.
Amazing. We had a flock of robins in our neighborhood recently, and I was so excited. Just so fun to see so many of them all at the same time.
Are there any other questions out there? Because if somebody else doesn't, I have some. Okay. Fire away. Here we go. I wanted to pick up on something you said early on in the talk when you were speaking about your trip to Antarctica, and how overwhelming climate change is for us to kind of think about, and then furthermore to do anything about as individuals. I know my own family is really quite passionate about doing our part or doing what we can, but we also happen to be, in terms of income, restricted. So sometimes we feel we can't do as much as we'd like to, because of the choices that sometimes we need to make. So I just, in your travels and in your conversations with other climate scientists and activists and artists, what do they talk about, in terms of reckoning as individuals? What can we do so that it's not so overwhelming, and so that we can feel good about, we're doing the right thing about, by using our own bags instead of plastic bags for the grocery store and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful question, Nathan. I think that really gets at the heart of the way we feel about climate change, because we feel that somehow our governments have to solve this problem, or people in positions of power. But in reality, and I think we've seen this play out over the last 4 years, when we had a government, an administration that wasn't interested in climate change whatsoever, and actually lifted regulations and weakened regulations as much as they possibly could. I think that during that 4 years, private industry stepped up. Car manufacturers weren't going to go back, even though the regulations were softened. They were like, no, we're on this track. We're going forward. We're going to continue to make fuel efficient vehicles and more electric vehicles. So we as consumers have an incredible amount of power. Even when we don't have a lot of spending power, we have choices to make every single day about what we can do and what we can purchase and what we cannot purchase, right? And how we can reuse things. So the kids that I worked with at the elementary school, they were like, yeah, let's do a recycling program at school. Let's collect newspapers and cans and make sure that our school is green. And that's something they could manage to do as 10-year-olds, like in their own classrooms, setting up bins where paper would be recycled was something tangible that they could do that was not overwhelming, but served Future Bear's mission, right? Or like, as you're in your own household, how many products can you conceivably purchase that are sustainable, that are eco-friendly, without breaking the bank? What could you use in your own particular household to, instead of bleached white paper towels, how could you, reuse paper towels or use sustainable paper towels? So I think like all of the little micro decisions that you don't think mean a damn thing. Imagine if we all started making those micro decisions. Would have a huge impact. So every year I try to do something like that. Like last year I stopped using toothpaste and I use these little chewable bite-sized things that come in a metal can that's recyclable.
Oh, wow.
And it does a great job. And that's one tiny thing I could do as a consumer. But I'm not going to use any more plastic toothpaste tubes ever in my entire life. Right. So I think like those sorts of small decisions can have huge ripple effects, as long as we talk about what we're doing and ask that question that you just asked. Like sometimes I just go on to social media and I'll say like, hey, has anybody tried this product? Or what do you guys think about, bamboo toilet paper? Has anybody tried that? And, find out if it works for other people. And if you can afford to make a change, then, try it. That's what I say. I mean, I don't think we can't suddenly lift ourselves out of this consumerist, fossil-based, fuel-based system. Like I can't live in a bubble. I can't not consume, but I can make some deliberate choices about what I consume and how.
I just want to say I tried those laundry leaves.
Yeah.
Not so good.
Oh, I tried those too. Not so great. Yeah, some of them are, yeah, that's why you got to ask around.
I wanted to share a comment from Nicola Kersley.
Mhm.
She said, my husband used to work with the UK Environment Agency, and the big takeaway was to reduce the air miles in your purchases and look at material and ingredients. For example, Misfit vegetable deliveries source their vegetables from all over the US, not just locally. So shop as local as you can.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I think that's a great point. Like sometimes this happens a lot because industries picked up on this idea that if they greenwash something, we'll buy it. So you have to be really smart as a consumer so that you're not just buying something that is labeled as eco-friendly, but you really do a little bit of research to figure out if this is like a genuinely good choice that you're making. Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to talk about one more thing. Again, going back to your experience in Antarctica, and I presumably all of us have traveled somewhere and know the difference between watching a National Geographic special on, be it Arizona or Namibia or China, and actual experience. But with that said, I went to Egypt as a young man and lived there for a year, and that experience profoundly changed my life. Probably, like you said, going to Antarctica did for you. But that was before the internet. And that was before, we had a lot of independent documentary films that were at our fingertips, where sometimes these documentaries are very personal experiences, and they really come away. So, just to speak about the difference between personally experiencing something and digitally experiencing something, and is it enough, to as an artist, you're a conduit for these experiences for the rest of us who can't have them, or haven't had them yet. So
yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's something that you have to ask yourself when these opportunities come along. Almost all of my travel has been supported through my college. They developed this amazing program for faculty where every 4 years or so, you can travel to this kind of, I wouldn't say exotic, but a destination outside of the US that is kind of less traveled, that you could tie into your research, and we travel as a group. And so many of the trips that I've taken have been with a group of faculty. And I would never be able to access that travel if I had to, cover the costs of it myself. So I've been very, lucky that way. And
wonderful.
I think that's why I feel like a responsibility then to make something of my experience, because it's so meaningful to me. And then, of course, the way that I process things as an artist is by making work about it. And so I want to then make the work about my experience and share it. So that experience isn't just a luxury item for me. It's a part of my research. It's integral to my work. And now, of course, in the last year, I had a residency lined up in Iceland for last summer. I didn't get to go. I won't get to go this summer either. And so I'm thinking more and more about, how can I get these experiences without traveling there? And I think you're right. I think educating yourself about other places through any means possible is really important. Watching a documentary about the Sudan, yes, very, very important. And you should do that. But if you get the chance to go somewhere, you get to formulate your own viewpoints outside of the lens of the documentarian. That is your lived experience. And so I hope we get back to a place where we can, do those activities, because I think it's incredibly important.
I think it's an excellent question in this time of pandemic too. Direct experiences versus what we've all been doing, seeing art in person versus just seeing it through the virtual tour. It's quite different. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think someone threw a hand up. No. Mikkel, did you throw your hand up?
Yeah, I put it back down again because I sent the message. I was going to send it to everybody, but my comment would be just that I think during this time of this pandemic, it's probably been very good for our planet that people don't travel so much, and probably good for the wildlife too. I mean, have you had any experience with that or talked to other people about that? How places that there would normally be lots of crowds of people, not so much anymore in this past year?
Yeah, in fact, so I did a previous project. I think you can see this piece over my shoulder. That was from Wonders of the Sea. And one of the aspects of that was talking about noise pollution underwater. So there's an incredible amount of noise from shipping and also from navies, sonar, all kinds of things, submarines, things that we humans are doing underwater to make noise, which disturbs whales and dolphins, all kinds of mammals that travel long distances under the ocean. So I just heard an article the other day that scientists were studying the drop in shipping traffic attributed to the pandemic is making the ocean quieter right now. And what they said was that whales were able to speak to each other without yelling. So normally they talk to each other like they're in a noisy room at a party, and they have to raise their voices to be heard. And now that there's less ambient noise, they don't have to yell at each other. And I thought that was so interesting. Yeah, so I think this, like, the silver lining of the pandemic, I guess, is that we humans are having less of an impact. I know it won't stay that way, but I do like that we're thinking about that and noticing it. Like, it's that, you know, we can do things without being lords of the earth all the time. And I think that's the technology we're using right now is fabulous for connecting people without creating a carbon footprint.
And I'd just like to share, I don't know if any of you have tried this when you're bored or looking for something to do, but until we can travel again, I found a really fun way is to go on Google Earth, Google Maps, and plop yourself down somewhere in the middle of the planet, anywhere, and you can explore. Just, you know, you can kind of walk around. So I spent a few hours one day on Lampedusa. It's Lampedusa. It's an island in the Mediterranean.
Nice.
And you can walk all over the city, and you can walk around the entire island. And it's I mean, obviously not anything like being there in person, but it's pretty close. So it's kind of cool.
So you can see them, but they can't see you.
That's right. And a lot of the
Ability cloak.
a lot of the footage, you know, that you might be looking at could have been shot 5-10 years ago. So it's completely outdated, you know, probably, but it's still, you know, a substitute for the moment.
There was a Ray Bradbury short story written in the 60s, I think, and he imagined this room made of television screens, floor to ceiling, and it was this children's nursery. And they sat in the nursery, and their favorite place to pull up was the African savannah. And it was a fully immersive space, and it became too immersive, and a lion came out and ate the nanny. I thought, yeah, like that's so interesting. Like, could we actually virtually visit places in this immersive way eventually, and not then create such a burden on the planet by traveling?
Any other questions from our audience?
Thank you so much, Rachel. Wow.
Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, and thank you everyone who joined us today. And if you haven't had a chance to come see Rachel's work in person, we hope that you will. It will be up through March 20th. We're open 10 to 5, Monday through Friday. No weekend hours as of yet due to the pandemic, but we'd love to see you. We're very cautious and respectful in our protocols. So you have to wear a mask and your temperature's taken when you come in, but we'd love to see you. And then you can fill out your survey and tell us your favorite 3 birds.
Yes.
That's right. And if you are in a group of 5 to 8, we offer these enriched curator tours. Rachel has joined for us for 2 tours so far. Thank you so much, Rachel. I know it's it's a bit of extra out of your day, but we really appreciate you engaging our guests. So these are still available. You'll have to give us a week advance notice. And again, it's for people or groups of between 5 and 8 people. And what we try to do is we try to invite the artists in person if they're local. And if they're not able to come, or if they're not local, we bring them in through Zoom and put them on a flat screen. So you still have the opportunity to engage them in real time in person. So it's a really nice way to spend a couple of hours and see art in person again. Well, thank you, Rachel. Catherine, anything else to?
I also wanted to say that I noticed some of your books are available for purchase through Vamp and Tramp booksellers.
Yeah.
And the Birdsong broadsides are $50 a piece, and that is a total bargain. So that when I can just see those and in everybody's house. Press Presbyterian.
Yeah, Catherine's right. There are works available for sale in the show. And I also sell works through Vamp and Tramp booksellers and off of my own website at rachelsimmons.net.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Yeah, you
You
See you
too.
soon.